Hello and welcome to Sustain, the podcast where we talk about sustaining open source for the long haul. Who are we? Where did we come from? Where are we going? Why is it raining? I think it's raining because the rain is on. But anyway, I'm very excited to talk to our guest today. Before we get to our guest, I want to introduce other hosts. I love it when other hosts come on the podcast, and today we are joined by not one, but two of them. So hello, Abigail. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm great. Excited to be here.
You sometimes go by Abby, but you can let people know if they can call you Abby, and I've just been doing it for years. Is it okay if I call you Abby?
You can call me Abby, Richard.
Cool. Don't call me Rich. That's my dad's name. Feels very weird. Eriol, how are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm good. I'm thinking about your dad. Sorry. Because
No, it's all right. It happens. Now I am too. I'm actually thinking about Pia, who called me Rich, and I said, don't. She says, your Twitter handle was Rich. And I'm like, oh, darn, that's a good point. Anyway, let's move on, because this is not the point of this podcast. Our guest today, who's been sitting there waiting while we faff about, is Sarah Rainsberger. Sarah, how are you doing?
I'm wonderful, thanks.
I'm glad to have you on here. Sarah answered my call on Mastodon when I was looking for maintainers for Maintainer Month. Yes, it's the month of May. Thank you, GitHub, for sponsoring a few of these podcasts where we get to talk to maintainers and talk about what they do and what they think about the process. Now, Sarah is a docs person. She actually pointed out an issue in the podcast docs that has lain there for who knows how many decades. So I'm very excited to have her on the podcast. Sarah works for Astro. You can find it at astro.build. And she's calling to us today from PEI, which is, for those of you who don't know, an entire state, basically, province of Canada in the eastern area. It's pretty sweet. Sarah has been an open source person for a long time. She works with documentation projects in Pacific with several maintainers and over 1,000 community contributors. And besides that, she has a background in high school mathematics education and academic counseling and curriculum development, which leads to my immediate first question. Is getting people to write the docs like talking to someone as a school counselor? Is it like trying to herd people and figure out how do I make this person's emotions get better so they can just do what they need to do?
I've been told that I am not supposed to say that herding developers is like herding teenagers, but there is some overlap. I will give you that.
So if you taught math before, right, if you were around teaching teenagers, what made you get into open source? How did that happen?
I got into open source not actually even knowing what open source was. I think, like a lot of people, you have a problem that you need to solve. And for me, the problem was this terrible wizard-generated website I inherited for my community choir, which had been going on for decades. And some member put this thing up, and with my background in mathematics education, English teaching, that kind of stuff, I was pretty competent. I was pretty technical. I'm actually, even before I got into any kind of web development, I considered myself a power user of a lot of things. And I had some basic HTML knowledge. I had made basic websites decades ago. So in any kind of community, people come and they bring their skills, and good community leaders identify people with skills that you need. And the director of the choir noticed that I was going to be able to fix their website so that the Christmas concert would no longer have to be on exactly December 14th every year, even when it wasn't. So that started this whole thing. So I started to update the community choir with HTML. I could edit the date. It could be accurate, but I didn't know any CSS. I couldn't make it look good. So at one point I decided I'm the only person here who's going to do this. And I started studying online, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, so that I could improve this website. And after taking a bunch of courses, after learning a bunch, then I thought, okay, now let me build a proper website, not just go in and update HTML files so that they were accurate. And at the time, that's when Astro was brand new. It was 2-3 months new. And so I had just studied React. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do something that I understand top to bottom. I had had a Jekyll blog, but I'm not a programmer. I didn't know Ruby. I wasn't really into all of that. So at the time, it was Gatsby blog. That's what everybody was doing. So I was going to build a Gatsby blog, but then people were talking about Astro. And because I had no legacy code to worry about, I was starting fresh. I thought, well, there's this established thing, lots of resources, or there's this new thing people are talking about that Checks Notes has like about 5 pages of documentation and it's still getting off the ground. And I thought, if I'm going in, let's go all in. And I engaged with both communities, and the Astro community was fabulous. They answered a bunch of questions. I gave a bunch of feedback because of how new it was, and just became so entrenched in a fantastic community. Again, at this point, still did not even know the phrase open source. Like that's just wasn't part of my vocabulary. I was going where the community was that could help me build this website. Then, having gotten in on such a ground floor, again, not really a web developer, barely out of boot camp type education, but experienced web devs were coming in and saying, what is this Astro thing? How does it work? Well, what do I know? I know how Astro works. I know how the 2 parts of the file go together. I know which stuff is on the server and which stuff is on the client. So I was able to contribute even at my level of experience in tech because of what I knew about Astro. And people noticed that. People appreciated that. Eventually, I was asked to help improve and then eventually lead the documentation because I do have a background in curriculum, education, teaching, and that's what I love to do. And at some point along the way, I learned what the word open source meant. That's the story.
When was that realization of the word open source? Do you remember what happened?
I can start benchmarking it between maybe 2021, 2022, somewhere along the line, where you just hear words over and over again and you sort of learn them by association. Oh, people are talking about this. So I had never really had this, open up my computer. I think I would like to start contributing to open source. Sometimes the notion that people even have that thought is so foreign to me because I came into it with a problem. I found a community who was working on the problem. I contributed what I could. I learned what I could. I took from them. I gave back. And then at some point, I guess this is what open source is.
That's great. Yeah, I love your story. And I think I remember reading some of this in the README project. One thing that struck me with the interview with the README project was that a lot of the contributions you were doing was from a Chromebook, and it was like mostly in the cloud. So that's really impressive. Can you talk a bit more about how you're able to become such a big leader in this open source project without even having like the most powerful machine?
Sure. I'm calling in right now from a Chromebook. When I was a math tutor, I had a tablet PC, and many of you might not even know what that was. That's before we had tablets, but we had PCs that were stylus-based. I've had Macs. And then at one point, I was like, you know what? I'm not really doing anything to warrant this kind of hardware. I pretty much do most of my stuff in the browser. So let's get a Chromebook for the next device. And it was a stylus-based, and that is one of my weaknesses. If your device has a stylus, I will buy it and I will be an evangelist for it. And I think that's my background as a math teacher, right? We do so much by hand when we're tutoring and working with kids. So I ended up with a Chromebook, and then I wanted to learn how to code. So some of the lessons I started taking were on a platform called Scrimba, which I also didn't know was brand new at the time. You know, when you discover something, you don't know how old it is. So Scrimba is a code learning platform, and they have videos. But the super cool thing is while you're watching the video, you can just hit pause at any time, and then it's a live IDE. So you're watching a video of someone else coding and showing you how to do things. And then at any moment you pause and you just jump right in, and you can play and you can mess around with it. And as soon as then you hit go, it just reverts back to where it was in the video, and you can save your own work like separately. So it's like, oh, okay. So apparently learning to code isn't a barrier with a Chromebook. I can keep going. So I kept going. Then I finished that and wanted to build a website. And I realized I know some React, but I don't know how or where to type it outside of Scrimba. So I searched and I found things like Gitpod, Stackblit. Stackblit was super new. That might not have even been on the radar then. CodeSandbox, CodePen, all those kinds of places. So in fact, my first few websites, I didn't even use a terminal. I was in CodeSandbox and I forked an Astro template and then I pushed it up to GitHub and then I could edit it in these online editors. I never did create anything. So when I did walk into the Astro Discord, there was a real disparity, not only experience from my end, but even them understanding what I was doing. So in the Astro Discord, this is my favorite channel in the Discord. It's the showcase channel. And it's, you post anything. Like, yes, you built a website because Astro's building websites, post your website. You built a blog post. Sure, drop your blog post. We want to read it. Made a video. You got some work in progress. Did you accomplish something? Throw it in showcase. We're all going to look at it. We're going to cheer it. My very first post to the Astro Discord was to the showcase channel. And it was, I got an Astro project running on CodeSandbox. And the response was like, why? This is how I build websites. This is how I operate. I won't say I was an amusement or a novelty or something, but they did find that super interesting. And I found it interesting that they found it super interesting because that's just everyone's lived experience, right? Like whatever you do, you assume that's what other people do. So I quickly discovered that my experience was very different from everyone else's. That yes, I was building Astro sites too in a very different way. And so at one point, it sort of became my mandate. I'm like, well, look, there've got to be other people like me who came from a free code camp or Scrimba or something, have Chromebooks. And so it sort of became a point that, yes, I have a Linux desktop here that I can do work on, but I still work in the cloud, even when I'm on that device. I will still use Gitpod, IDX, which is a Firebase Studio. That's how I maintain the docs. I like to stay true to that perspective. And someone had better be doing this on these low-powered devices. Someone should know how this is going to all play out for people who don't have the fancy high-end books. But then on the other hand, when people come in and they're having trouble either getting set up or they have, certain issues, and then we realize it's because, PowerShell on Windows is like this, then there's a part of me going, you're missing out. Why are you getting stuck because of your device? Like, I don't have those kinds of problems. It's an interesting perspective that I have chosen to maintain low tech. The other device that I will develop on is my Android tablet. So in keeping with that, I am known for my evil devices. So I have a Samsung tablet, but it's a 14-inch tablet. So whenever we need to test on different devices, I have a 14-inch screen running Android mobile Chrome. And you would be surprised at sometimes what I get because it's mobile. But who assumes your mobile device is bigger than your laptop? Well, not too many people. So I consider it a point of pride that I will use the slightly more niche devices or stick with the online code editors because I think it does help us understand where our community and our audience could be coming from.
What a wonderful journey through the joys of discovering how to interact with tech regardless of its sometimes the ways in which people show off with tech. So I love to hear it. And to bring it around to some of the docs work and how you use your devices. I have had the experience of finding a lot of people that view docs as like just a necessity. Get them out of the way, do the bare minimum, get some docs there, and then it's done, right? But I think through hearing you speak, I can hear the power of how communication can build inclusive spaces for people to contribute. Can you talk a little bit more about how you utilize communication and your docs in order to bring those people into the communities that you foster?
Absolutely. Docs are so important to a project that you want someone else to use or contribute to. And to be fair, not every open source project wants you to use it or wants you to contribute back. But I'm going to go with the assumption that many projects out there want you to use it and are looking for help. So when that is the case, Docs is like a secret superpower in attracting people to contribute, to help, I think of docs as support over and above everything else. That's what it is. And it's support that works for us maintainers even when we are sleeping. It is self-serve support. It's the most scalable kind of support you can have. That doesn't mean it's perfect. That doesn't mean it always works 100% of the time for everyone. But it really is our best shot at supporting our user base and our contributors and letting us get some sleep so we don't have to do it in real time 24/7. So this communicating about your project and how it works, it's super important to me. With a background in education, it's something I've fallen into naturally.
You must have faced this as a teacher as well. So the next question is, even though docs are awesome, people still view it as low quality and they view it as not being a developer. And I don't think that's a controversial statement to say that people view it that way. I don't think it's accurate. I know you agree with me. That's still often the case where developers are like, oh, cool. Yeah, that's the docs person. They're not real coders. How do you communicate to them that that's not the case? How do you help convince people that, oh, docs are not low quality. They're really technical?
Yeah, isn't that funny? Everyone seems to underestimate the importance of docs until they're using someone else's project. If you scour social media, it is full of developers complaining about docs they have to use. I say that rather jokingly and facetiously, but it's true that most of the devs don't end up using the docs for their own project. And so there's a real disconnect. I think in one way, they might not even think of it as docs in the same way because they're not using them in the same way. That's just a little anecdote that if developer is out there with those thoughts that docs are not important, think of the last time you tried to use someone else's docs and how angry you got and how indignant you were and why wasn't this written this way? And then go thank your docs person, or just make that little bit extra effort when you have to create docs for your feature. So I've told you my backstory. I don't have a lot of, say, big corporate software development experience. I ended up in like this little magical unicorn place with a fabulous community and a team that just promoted inclusivity and valued unity and onboarding and all this stuff from the beginning. So, I mean, Astro wouldn't have an Astro Docs, which, by the way, has way more contributors than the Astro Core Code project itself. We wouldn't have that if that didn't come top down. So I am coming from a place where it was valued. And this is what happens when you value it.
I love that.
Keeping on this value line of thinking, what are some strategies you use to recognize the values of the contributors to Astro Docs and to help them feel like they're valued and help that community grow?
That's a great question. And it's something that we are really, really proud of. Now that we've passed 1,000 contributors to Astro Docs itself, just the Docs project, now I don't have to keep checking and saying almost 1,000. It's easier for me to just, now I can say over 1,000. Sometimes we get a little silly about it, but the key thing is we are super intentional about it. So we have processes in place. We have built tools to make sure people are recognized. If I were to take you very quickly through contributor journey, it probably goes a little something like this. You end up in the Astro Discord and you mention that, oh, I think this code example is wrong, or, oh, there's a typo. And someone will welcome you. Hey, nice to see you. Oh, would you like to fix that? No problem. I can do it, but we'd be more than happy to have a contribution if you'd like to fix that. People get really surprised, but they're like, oh. And the number of people who have ever contributed to open source is huge. And so it might not be on their minds. And then they might sheepishly say, never actually made a PR. Oh, that's fine. We can help you. Sure, let's just go through it. Tell me at what point you get stuck. Here's where you go. They make a PR. They receive an automated welcome message when a PR from a first-time contributor, because GitHub will tell us that, saying, welcome thank you. Then we set expectations. We say a maintainer is going to look at this probably within 3 days. So we want people to know that it's just not going into the void. We deal with the PR. They get lots of comments in the PR. When it's ready to merge, they always get, great, this was a super helpful addition. Welcome to Team Docs. That will always be in their approval message, gets merged. We have a bot that posts in our Discord. And this part is manual, though, is that when it's a first-time contributor, all our maintainers know, oh, we just merged a first-time PR. Everybody come up with a pun because we have first-time contributor alert. It's a manual message. We haven't automated that part. And they will get a pun based on the title of their PR, because that's what we could see in the Discord message. We train our maintainers on this. And we're like, no, the pun can't be based on the content because then it's an inside joke. We're only going to know what the title is. And it has to be based on the title. So this is also new maintainer initiation, right? They need to know how to deal with a first-time contributor. And then we have a handful of regular people who watch for these to make sure they emoji react with them. So it's very open. It's over-the-top recognition. This is something I've mentioned in a lot of spaces before that I wish GitHub would help us more with, but we have built tooling. First, it was a maintainer who built a website, and you could drop a PR link into the website, and anyone who was associated, any GitHub account with that PR, they made a comment, they reviewed, not just commits, it would spew back in the proper formatting how to add those people as co-authors to that PR. We've been doing that for years. Last year, one of our maintainers turned that into browser extension. So now all our maintainers use this browser extension. So just before we merge, we hit the add co-authors button and we pop them there so that more and more people get this kind of credit. We have regular working calls. So every Thursday is talking and docking, and it's 2 hours, and it's the Docs core team. And we're just working on docs. It could be spontaneous. It could be planned activities. Like sometimes we know we have a big task we want to do. We get everyone in the crowd to jump into a GitHub code space so that they're in the PR. And sometimes we have activities like, oh, we have to find all references of this and change it to this. So everybody's screaming, I'm doing this page, I'm doing this page. And then they're all part of the PR and they all get credit when that PR is merged. And we have built an Astro badges site where all of these GitHub contributions, filing an issue, reviewing a PR, and to all of the different Astro repos, even different kinds of PR. So translations we have separated out. So everyone has their own little Astro badge. It can be embedded in HTML, put it up in your GitHub profile. And every time we do a minor release, we have always thanked the contributors who added features at the bottom of the blog post. We had their GitHub names. Last minor release, we were going through and adding all the extra people with, non-commits or didn't leave the PRs. And I asked them, like, do you want all the docs people too? Because all those features got docs and were translated. And they said, yeah. So then my commit to that PR was we had 2 or 3 lines of names at the bottom to thank. And when I brought the docs in, that quadrupled because this is the complete team and this is everyone that we have going. So we have a real culture of getting involved. I will post on social media. It's another Thursday, so we're going to be talking and docking. And I don't know if that attracts people, but when it does, is it sends the message that this is how we operate. And I'm sure there are people who have never been to talking and docking who would tell you, oh yeah, Astro does this stuff with their docs. So even when people don't do it directly, that's how we advertise ourselves. And I think we are kind of known for that.
So over 1,000 docs contributors was what you said earlier, which is a phenomenal amount of people creating documentation for Astro Docs. I'm really curious if there is any docs for the docs. Have you ever had a situation where somebody's documentation writing hasn't been up to standard? Are there protocols in place for helping them get to where you want to be as an Astro Docs project?
Right. So there's 2 questions there. Have we docked the docs? You bet we've docked the docs. Okay, so contribute.docs.astro.build. If you go there, That's the title of the page. Astro Docs Docs, AD squared. Yet we have an entire documentation site about the Astro Docs and how to contribute, including first-time contributor advice. The systems that we use, because some of our docs are kept in the main Astro repo so that they're available to VS Code for IntelliSense. But otherwise, because we are a Astro helps you build websites, our docs are a separate website itself. And so we use GitHub Actions to pull content from, so our error messages are in the code base, but they get pulled with GitHub Action into our docs as a PR. So yeah, you better believe that we have Astro Docs Docs. We joke that my personal blog is like Astro Docs 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 because I help people who need to manage documentation. So that we have. And that is another vehicle for people to contribute, because for sure we got some typos in Astro Docs Docs that need fixing, or some of our processes change, or we standardize things, because when we're dealing with a project over a few years and then so many contributors, inconsistencies will slip in. And so, no, we're going to standardize this. Okay, then I guess we better go update Astro Docs Docs so that everybody knows what the standard is. There's just so many ways people can contribute. The second part that you asked was about dealing with quality. We have some specific ideas around quality. And the first point that I always emphasize to this team of maintainers is someone felt that this PR was important. PRs just don't fall out of the sky. They are effort and they are work. Someone made this contribution for a reason. It might not be the contribution you want. It might not be something you can use, but there was some motivation behind this. And it could be altruistic. It could be wanting to show off. Like there's all kinds of motivations. So you meet people where they are, and we try really hard. Can we accept this PR? What would it take to accept this PR? So yes, there's always going to be PRs that you can't use as is. You may be able to use them even if they don't contain a single character of the original PR. I discovered that doesn't really matter too much to people. You know, I was a math teacher. My degree's in math and English. I've done a lot of essay editing for kids, like helped them with things like that. As a writer, the things I write myself, I feel very personally attached to them, but not as super attached to their own writing as maybe you are when you come from this. So they just know that they're helping, and they take edits probably more gracefully than I do. So there's lots of ways that we can turn those contributions into something that we can use. And we do have a docs motto, and it's not worse than what we had before. So if a contribution will literally not make the docs any worse than they were, we can accept it. And because we have a culture of contributing and trying to rope as many people in, because I want other people doing my work for me, why wouldn't I want many people excited about contributing to Astro as they could be? If it's not worse than what it was before, then we can accept it. So there are ways that you can accept many contributions, probably most, certainly not all.
I love that so much. So going back a little bit around having like that separate docs for a docs site, most projects I see, they have onboarding documentation for new contributors for the entire project. And it sounds like you have something a little bit separate for the docs. And you've created something that's been incredibly welcoming. I think we see it in the 1,000+ contributors there. Why did you decide to do it differently? And is there room for that welcoming culture to be part of all of Astro?
Yeah, I think Astro has a great welcoming culture in general. There's only so many people and so many hours in the day. And because the Astro Docs site has just ended up as such a vehicle, right? It just attracts contributors. I think we had more need for shepherding and onboarding, because you also do get the people who are like, oh, it's a typo. I know how to fix that. Or what? So you will get more people coming in, but then maybe they mislabeled the PR or they've done something with the process. And because we don't have as much of that happening with the code, it's not quite as necessary to have such an elaborate documentation for contributing. although they have their contributing docs for, setting up the code base, working on that. So the whole organization is really welcoming. And what I would say is that I think it's pretty common for people to make docs contributions before code contributions, just in general, because it's easier for you to spot something that's wrong. I often say that you can ship code and be like, I'll refactor that later. Nobody's going to see. They're just going to experience how it works. It's working in prod. I can go back and refactor. There's a little bit more pressure sometimes to get things right, but it just means that the work is more visible. And so the mistakes that we make are a little more visible, a little more apparent. Typos are distracting when you read. When you read a typo, you will notice. So what Astro Docs can do is handle the onboarding, is handle the people who have never made a contribution before, is handle people who are new to the organization. And we can get some of that friction out of the way by having them make these contributions and build up their confidence, and they get to know people. And you always feel more comfortable if you have a connection with people or if there's people and you know that you'll be welcomed. So I do think that it's super important that our docs is maybe a little over the top with our contributing docs. And I think that does help the code and the core project as well. And several of our maintainers and our core maintainers started by translating the docs. And let me tell you, you want to find mistakes in your English docs? You want translators, because they have to read so closely and so carefully with such attention to figure out how to interpret it. They don't just see the words, they see the meaning behind it. They need to understand what's jargon here versus what's a word that can be translated, what should be kept. There is just so much care and attention that they put into the docs. I know every time I publish some docs, I'm going to wake up and I know which 3 languages are already going to have translation PRs submitted and which translator will already have a PR for my English docs based on what he found while trying to translate the docs. So docs as onboarding, it can be much more comfortable to contribute. It can feel low pressure to contribute because yes, a typo is distracting, but it's not going to break the build. So we can be more forgiving about what we accept. People can go into it with a more casual attitude. We can have a little fun with it. They build up relationships. They see the regulars in Discord all around. And then it gets to the point where they realize there's a code change they can make. And they can move that way if they choose to. Or just stay in docs.
More casual, have more fun. Those are excellent words and notes to end on. Sarah, this has been really, really cool. I feel like I have around 50,000 more questions. Unfortunately, this is an hour-long podcast, so we have to wrap it up here. Now, I know that you can find astro.build at astro.build. I'm seeing something called D squared, which I assume is docs squared, which is the docs. Where can I find that?
So you can find the docs from the Astro site at docs.astro.build. And AstroDocs squared is at contribute.docs.astro.build. But you can also find them from the docs site, which on the very first page, I'm very proud, very first page of AstroDocs is this little universe of GitHub avatars of contributors. And then, your call to action is contribute to the docs with the link to the page that will get you to the contributing docs.
Awesome. And we can find you at rainsberger.ca. That's RAINSBERGER.ca. That stands for Canada. And you're also, of course, on Mastodon, and there'll be more links in the show notes. Sarah, this has been really awesome. I'm really grateful that you brought all this energy about docs and being a new contributor and just being someone who's like, I need to fix the choir website, turned into this whole career. So thank you so much. Don't leave yet. At the end of every show, we have Spotlights where we highlight other people's projects or things, which I'm really excited about today. So Abby, what is your spotlight?
Yeah, my spotlight is communityrule.info. I was in a governance conversation earlier today, and this resource came up. And it's something I've shared for years, but it's a nice way to see some templates of governance for just community groups. And it includes things from BDFL to consensus driven. And it's a good resource for any open source project thinking about governance.
So I had a little email in my inbox today to say the state of the docs has been published. So I believe you can find the stateofdocs.com to read that report. I've read a little bit. It's already great.
And I'm actually going to roll right off of Abby's. CommunityRule.info is partially run by Nathan Schneider, who we've had on this podcast. Really awesome open source governance person. He and his lab have recently released the Protocol Oral History Project, where he's done these hour-long conversations with all these different people who do certain protocols. So we have people like Evan Prodromou, whose name I'm probably mispronouncing, an amazing Quebecois guy behind Mastodon. We've got Coraline Ada MK. I was interviewed for linguistics, not for docs. So that's kind of cool. I know this shouldn't be touting my own stuff, but it just came out, and these are really, really cool oral history projects. So think of it as documentation about the history of how people interfere with protocols. So I will drop the link for that. Also, Nathan Schneider's work. Nathan, you're amazing. Sarah, what is your spotlight today?
I'm going to spotlight the tool that I use most often to maintain the Astro docs, which is a browser extension. It's at github.com, Delucis, Better GitHub co-authors. Right now, we only have one word for people who contribute via GitHub, and it's co-authors. So we want to cram as many people into there as we can. It's a fantastic little browser extension, just one button. If anyone was in your PR and contributed in some way, you can give co-author credit to them. They get a green square. They recognize that they are valued simply for a thumbs up, a quick review, a comment. Yeah, let's do this.
Sarah, thank you so much for coming on. That was really, really awesome. It was great to hear so much about docs. And listeners, I hope you have enjoyed this podcast. If you have, there are several things you can, of course, do. One, you can go to github.com/sustainers, and you can find our website and more information about how Sustain works. And there's going to be spelling errors, and we take doc PRs. And so I would be very happy to have anyone come on and just contribute. You can also contribute to Sustain in other ways by getting involved with the organizing committee, by seeing about running your own Sustain events, or by sharing. The main way you can contribute at the moment, because we are low on funds, and I've been saying this for a while, but that rusty wheel is just getting a lot rustier, is by asking your employer or asking a funder whether they'd be interested in keeping the Sustain podcast going, which would be really, really cool. You can go to opencollective.com/SustainOSS to donate with your own dollars if you would like, or your yen or your other euro. I don't know, any currency will work, unless it's embargoed. If your currency is currently being embargoed by the US, it'll be difficult for us to pay you. I'm saying that because I want you to think about it. So if yours not embargoed, you could still donate. Sorry, I'm just getting desperate at this point. Other things you could do is you can follow Sustain on Mastodon, on Blue Sky, on LinkedIn. We post these podcasts there. But really, go check out astro.build. Go read Sarah's website. Go look at her photographs of birds, because she uses a Nikon camera to go out there and take great photographs of blue jays and chickadees and all the good things. And again, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on. This was great.
Thank you so much for having me.